A whiteout hit Detroit on Christmas night. At the far end of Maple Street, a failing little diner-turned house sat half-buried in snow. Inside, the power was out, the heater was dead, and 32-year-old Kesha Williams huddled in the dark with her shivering 2-year-old son, Marcus, trying to keep him warm over a gas stove. Then came the sound. Engines. Dozens of them. Out of the blizzard emerged 25 Hell's Angels, lining up at her door, begging for shelter from the storm. Shaking, sure she was inviting danger into her home, Kesha still opened the door. They cooked. They talked. They laughed. And she had no idea that 3 days later, that one decision would bring 1,500 roaring motorcycles back to her street and change not just her life, but an entire neighborhood forever. Before we rewind to where it all began, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something special. The cracked clock on Kesha's kitchen wall read 3:47 a.m. when she finally let herself sit down. Her hands, rough from bleach, detergent, and too many mops, shook as she counted the crumpled bills on the table. $7.32. That was all that stood between her son and an empty plate in the morning. She leaned forward, pressing her palms over her tired eyes. At 32, she looked a decade older. The glow in her dark skin had been replaced by the flat sheen of someone clinging to survival on 3 dead-end jobs and almost no sleep. The little house groaned in the winter wind. It sounded as tired as she felt. Marcus slept in the corner of the kitchen, bundled into a nest of old blankets and couch cushions. The heater in his bedroom had died 2 weeks ago, and there was no money to fix it, so she kept him close to the stove's thin warmth. His small chest rose and fell, peaceful, oblivious to the mountain of unpaid bills, the shut-off notices, and the dreams his mother had quietly buried. The house squatted at the very end of Maple Street, separated from the other homes by an empty, weed-choked lot nobody wanted. It felt like the neighborhood had pushed her to its edge the same way life had. The white families in the nicer homes down the block almost never spoke to her. When they did, it was mostly narrowed eyes, murmured gossip, and conversations that stopped the moment she walked by. "Why do you have to leave us, Jerome?" she whispered into the quiet, her voice barely louder than the humming fridge. Her ex-husband had walked out 8 months earlier, saying he needed to find himself. He had. With a 23-year-old waitress in Tennessee. The child support papers collecting dust in a folder on top of her refrigerator might as well have been written in blood for how much they hurt, and how useless they'd turned out to be. Her phone buzzed on the table, making her jump. A text from her manager at the cleaning company. "Don't bother coming in tomorrow. We're letting you go. Your kid cried too much during your shift. Customers complained." She read it 3 times, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less deadly. They didn't. 3rd job gone in 2 months. The laundromat had fired her for bringing Marcus in when he got sick. The diner had let her go after she nodded off on her feet, 18 hours into a triple shift. "How am I supposed to work if I can't find anyone to watch you, baby?" she murmured, looking at Marcus. Daycare? $200 a week she didn't have. Her mother, the only family who had ever understood, had died 3 years earlier. Her mother's voice floated up in her memory, firm, loving. "Kesha, baby, remember Grandma's fried chicken recipe? That spice mix has been in our family for generations. One day if things get real bad, that recipe just might save you." Back then Kesha had laughed. How could some flour and seasoning save a life? Now with $7 to her name and a child to feed, the memory felt less like sentiment and more like a lifeline. She went to the old wooden cabinet and pulled out a scarred recipe box. The index cards inside were yellowed, covered in her mother's careful handwriting. There was the fried chicken recipe, and all the sides and sauces that had fed a whole neighborhood once upon a time, back when her mother's tiny soul food restaurant still had customers. "Maybe it's time to try again," she whispered, doubt threading through the thought. By morning she'd decided. She spent her last $7 on chicken and bare bones ingredients. She dragged 2 folding tables into the living room and turned the front of the house into a makeshift dining room. In the window, she propped a hand-lettered sign, "Mama's Kitchen, authentic soul food, made with love." As the smell of frying chicken filled the house, Marcus sat in his high chair, babbling happily. The secret spice blend crackled in the pan, turning the crust into something her mother used to call, "Shut your eyes good." But the hours passed and no one came. From the window she watched people heading to the bus stop. Some slowed at the sign, squinting to read it. Then they saw her face through the glass, and sped up, heads turned away. Mrs. Henderson, 3 houses down, paused on the sidewalk and studied the menu board from a distance. Hope flared in Kesha's chest. She rushed to open the door. "Morning, Mrs. Henderson. Would you like to try some fried chicken? It's my grandmother's recipe." The older white woman's expression changed the instant she saw who was speaking. Suspicion tightened her mouth. Something uglier flickered in her eyes. "I don't think so," she said, stepping back. "I've heard about you. Single mother, no husband, probably don't even know who the father is. I don't eat food from people like that." The words sliced clean, but Kesha forced a smile to stay put. "It's really good, ma'am. Fresh, clean." "I said no," Mrs. Henderson snapped. "And you shouldn't be running a business out of your house. This is a decent neighborhood. Keep your kind of trouble to yourself." Kesha watched her march away, shame tightening her throat. She closed the door and leaned her back against it, the rejection settling on her shoulders like another heavy coat. Marcus watched her quietly from his high chair, eyes wide and trusting. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, picking him up. "Mama's gonna figure this out. I promise." But staring at platters of perfect fried chicken no one would buy, she couldn't help wondering if she'd just made a promise she couldn't keep. Outside, Detroit winter pressed against the glass. Inside, the chill of isolation felt just as sharp. The phone rang. Likely another bill collector. She let it go to voicemail. There was nothing to tell them they wanted to hear. Tomorrow she would start again. Another application. Another manager's skeptical look at a black woman with a toddler and a spotty work record. "Mama," Marcus said softly, touching her cheek. "I'm here, baby." She swallowed down the tears burning her eyes. "Mama's right here." As the pale afternoon faded, Kesha held her son and wondered how much longer she could fight a world that seemed determined to keep her in the dark. The scent of her mother's fried chicken still hung in the air. Like a memory, like a promise, like a dream growing dim. 3 weeks crawled by. Since Mrs. Henderson's cruelty, Kesha's restaurant had managed exactly 4 customers. For people who'd closed their eyes after that first bite and sworn they'd never tasted better chicken in their lives. For customers couldn't pay the rent, couldn't keep the lights on, couldn't beat back the stack of bills that had become a permanent fixture on her kitchen table. December 23rd arrived under a low, heavy sky. The weather reports had warned for days. The worst snowstorm to hit Detroit in 20 years. Kesha stirred a pot of chicken and dumplings and watched the first flakes drift past her window. At least she'd managed to buy bulk ingredients for the holidays, imagining a Christmas rush that never came. Those few loyal customers had left just enough cash to stock her pantry. "Mama cold," Marcus complained from his high chair, rubbing his small hands together. She turned up the stove, wrapped him in an extra blanket. The chill in the house felt sharper than usual, but she told herself it was just the storm pushing in. By evening, snow fell in thick sheets, swallowing the world beyond the front yard. The last few cars that usually passed her isolated house disappeared. The night filled with the roar of wind and the groan of ice-laden branches. She fed Marcus, got him ready for bed, and kept nudging up the thermostat, but the air never seemed to warm. A sliver of fear slid under her ribs. On Christmas Eve morning she woke into ice. Her breath fogged in front of her. Marcus shook under a pile of blankets, his teeth chattering. She bolted to the thermostat. An error code blinked where the temperature should be. "No, no, no," she whispered, stabbing at buttons. "Not now. Please God, not now." The heating company's line was chaos, a recorded voice finally. "Due to severe weather, all non-emergency calls will be addressed after the storm. Emergency response time. 72 hours. 72 hours, she repeated, stunned. Marcus started to cry, a thin, miserable sound. She scooped him up, skin icy under his layers. That afternoon, the power died with a hard click and left them in darkness. Her hands shook as she felt for matches and candles. The flames she finally coaxed to life did almost nothing to cut the cold. Outside, the storm screamed. It felt personal, like the sky itself had decided to break her. She moved them into the kitchen. the smallest room in the house, and shut every other door to trap whatever warmth she could. Thank God the stove was gas. She turned on burners and boiled pot after pot of water, hoping the steam would take the edge off the freeze. She cracked the oven door for extra heat. "It's gonna be okay, baby," she murmured, pulling Marcus into her lap. "We've got food. We'll stay right here, nice and warm." Her stockpile of beans, rice, canned goods, flour, and spices suddenly looked less like a failed restaurant inventory and more like survival. By the second day, the cold bore down like a living thing. She and Marcus wrapped themselves in every blanket, coat, and towel in the house, nestling as close to the stove as they dared. Candle stubs guttered low. She rationed the few left. Marcus started to cough, a dry, worrying sound. Each shudder of his tiny body tightened the knot in her chest. Snow piled up outside, pressing against the windows until daylight turned to a dull gray glow. The house felt entombed. On the third night, with the wind still howling, Kesha sat in the dark, Marcus dozing fitfully in her arms. It took her a moment to realize she was hearing something new under the storm. A low, distant rumble. She held her breath, listening. Engines. The deep, throaty growl of multiple motorcycles, Harleys by the sound, cutting straight through a blizzard. The noise grew louder, nearer, until it vibrated in the floorboards. Who would be riding motorcycles in this? She breathed, clutching Marcus tighter. Headlights sliced through the curtain of snow, ghostly beams sweeping across her yard. Dark shapes moved beyond the frosted glass. Then the engines cut off all at once. Silence rushed in. Snow crunched under heavy boots. Several sets. Men's voices carried faintly, rough and low, words swallowed by the wind. Marcus stirred. 3 hard knocks rattled the front door. Kesha's breath hitched. No one had ever come to her door during a storm. No one came at all, really. The knocking came again, more urgent. "Mum." A man's voice boomed through the wind. "We need help. We're freezing out here." Her mind flashed through every horror story she'd ever heard about motorcycle gangs, about women alone. Marcus whimpered. She rocked him, eyes locked on the door, wondering if opening it would save them, or finish them. The third knock hit like a gunshot. She pressed herself against the kitchen wall, as far from the front door as she could manage while still hearing what happened outside. "Please, ma'am," the voice called again, rough but edged with panic. "We're not here to hurt anyone. We just need out of this storm." She crept low to the front window and peered through the small gap not yet clogged with snow. The yard was full of movement. Dark figures against the swirling white. Motorcycle headlights glared like a row of angry eyes. Shadows leaped across the drifts. She counted at least 6 or 7 bikes. Maybe more. Her stomach knotted. 25 men stood in her yard, shoulders dusted in snow, leather jackets stiff with ice. Helmets, scarves, balaclavas hid most of their faces. They stamped their boots, arms wrapped tight around themselves, trying to keep warm. The man at the front was enormous. Even under layers of riding gear, his size was intimidating. He pulled off his helmet, revealing a weathered face framed by a thick snow-speckled beard. His eyes were sharp, scanning. He looked straight at the window. Kesha dropped down, heart pounding. "We know you're in there," he called. "We can see the candlelight." He paused, then raised his voice over the wind. "Look, I get it, this is scary. But we can't ride in this anymore. We either freeze out here, or we wait it out inside. We'll leave as soon as the storm breaks. You have my word." Every instinct screamed, "Stay hidden. Say nothing. Let them go." She tightened her hold on Marcus. Through the glass, she saw one of the men stagger sideways. Another caught him, and even through the blizzard Kesha saw the dark stain soaking the man's pant leg. Blood. These weren't men hunting for trouble. They were in it. Marcus coughed, a harsh bark that shook his whole body. The cold inside their house wasn't much kinder than the cold outside. At least those men had each other. She had her son, and the echo of her mother's voice. "Baby girl, when somebody's in trouble, you help. Doesn't matter what they look like or where they come from. One day it'll be you needing help. The Lord sees it all, and what you give comes back tenfold." Her mother had given away their last $10 more than once. Had invited strangers for dinner when rent was past due. Her father had called it foolish. "Help the traveler," she'd said. "Even if he looks like your enemy." Another knock. Softer this time. Ma'am, we've got a man out here hurt bad, the big man called. He wiped out on the ice 10 miles back. Leg's been bleeding for hours. The cold's making it worse. I'm begging you. Just till the storm passes. We'll sleep on the floor. We won't touch anything. The pain in his voice was unmistakable. They sounded less like predators now, more like lost soldiers. Kesha stood. Her legs wobbled as she walked to the front door with Marcus clinging to her neck. She pressed her forehead to the cold wood. Are you really hurt? She called. Yes, ma'am, came the reply. Danny took a bad spill. We've been trying to find shelter ever since. How many of you are there? 25. I know that sounds like a lot, but we ride together. We don't leave anyone behind. 25 strangers. 25 men. In her tiny house. With her baby. It was either madness, or exactly what her mother would have done. Marcus' little hand patted her cheek. He babbled something half-word, half-sound, the tone oddly encouraging. Mama's scared, baby, she whispered. Sometimes you gotta be scared and brave at the same time. She drew a long breath, turned the deadbolt and cracked the door open. The man in front filled the frame. Snow clung to his beard. His leather jacket was covered in patches and pins she didn't recognize. But his eyes, tired, strained, held a gentleness that didn't match his size. Thank you, he said, voice rough with relief. Name's Mike. We won't forget this. Behind him, 24 men waited in the swirling snow. In another life, the scene would have looked like a movie about outlaws. Tonight they just looked cold. Get in here, she said quietly. Before you all freeze to death. As the first biker stepped over her threshold, shaking snow off his shoulders, Kesha knew. Whatever happened next, she would not be alone anymore. They filed in one by one. Big bodies, heavy jackets, thick boots. Yet they moved with surprising care. Each wiped his feet on the small doormat. Each stepped around her furniture instead of through it. They were almost gentle. Mike shut the door tight and immediately turned the lock. When Kesha flinched, he lifted his hands. Just keeping the cold out, ma'am. And keeping you safe while we're here. The tiny living room and kitchen were suddenly packed. 25 leather-clad men, faces flushed from the cold, helmets and gloves coming off. Thank you, a younger man near the doorway said, voice barely above a whisper. You just saved our hides. Marcus peeked out from his pile of blankets, more curious than afraid. A biker with gray at his temples and soft eyes spotted him and gave a little wave. Marcus ducked, then peeked again. That your boy? The man asked. Yes, Kesha said. Marcus. He's too. Handsome little fella. The man smiled. I'm Tommy. Got grandbabies his age. Tommy looked more like a kind grandfather than a criminal. His patched jacket was well worn but clean. His beard was neatly trimmed. His smile reached his eyes. Some of the ice in Kesha's chest melted. Mike limped forward, favoring his left leg. Ma'am, I gotta be straight with you. Danny's in bad shape. He pointed toward the couch. A young man slumped there, face pale, jeans soaked in blood around his left thigh. His hands trembled in his lap. I've got some first aid stuff, Kesha said, hurrying toward the bathroom. Let me see what I can do. She returned with a plastic bin of bandages, antiseptic, tape. Kneeling beside Danny, she gently cut away the fabric stuck to the wound. He sucked in a breath but didn't pull away. This is deep, she said, glancing up at Mike. He needs a hospital. Roads are a mess, Mike replied. We've been trying to get him to one for hours. We couldn't see more than 10 feet with that snow. Kesha took a breath. I can clean it and wrap it. You'll have to keep pressure on it and watch for fever. As she worked, she felt the weight of 24 eyes on her. It didn't feel threatening. It felt reverent. You're good at this, Danny muttered weakly. My mama was a nurse before she opened her restaurant, Kesha said. I picked up what I could. While she worked, the others quietly self-organized. A few drifted to the kitchen, checking her food stores with careful, respectful hands. Others checked windows and doors, not as intruders, but like men who'd learned to secure perimeters the hard way. A tall man with a thick southern accent raised his voice from the kitchen. Ma'am, Kesha, right? Would it be okay if we cook something? We've got rations in our packs. Looks like you've got supplies here. We could whip up enough for everybody. Please call me Kesha, she said, taping down the last of Danny's bandage. And yeah, I've got plenty of food. I was trying to run a restaurant out of here. Mike's eyebrows lifted. A restaurant? What kind? Soul food. Mostly my mother's fried chicken. Your mama's fried chicken, Tommy grinned. Now we're talking. Haven't had real home cooking in months. Soon the small kitchen hummed with activity. Men who looked like they'd never stepped away from a bar fight in their lives moved with practiced skill at the stove. They chopped vegetables, stirred pots, and followed Kesha's quiet directions as if she were a commanding officer. The aroma of seasoned chicken and simmering vegetables filled the house, pushing back the cold. Marcus crept closer, drawn by the smells and the low, gentle voices. Tommy sat cross-legged on the floor, helping him stack empty cans into towers. You've got a sharp one, said Jake, a broad-shouldered biker watching Marcus' careful concentration. Reminds me of my nephew back home. When they finally sat down to eat, some at the table, most cross-legged on the floor, Mike cleared his throat. Kesha, we owe you an explanation. About who we are. She looked around at the faces, scarred, weathered, young, old, all strangely earnest. We're mostly vets, Mike began. Army, Marines, Navy. Served in different units, different wars. Coming home wasn't easy. That brotherhood we had over there? The sense of mission? Civilian life didn't exactly fill that hole. So we found each other, Tommy said. Started writing. Looking out for each other the way we did in uniform. We're not a gang, Jake added firmly. We don't run drugs, don't shake people down. We're just men who needed a family and made one. Danny, color improved from food and bandages, spoke up from the couch. We were on our way to a Christmas ride in Chicago. All the Midwest chapters meet up every year. Toys for kids, food for families, kinda our thing. The forecast said the storm would hit tomorrow, Mike said. We were trying to beat it to a motel when Danny hit that ice. Kesha listened, surprised at how wrong her assumptions had been. I know what people see when they look at us, Mike said quietly. Leather, tattoos, bikes. They see trouble. They don't see the guys who did their time, came home broken, and are just trying to take care of each other. The words hit a place in her chest that still hurt. I get it, Kesha said. People look at me, a black single mom in a beat-up house, and they think they know the whole story. That I'm lazy, or stupid, or picked the wrong man. They don't see that I loved somebody who swore he'd love me back. They don't see I'm breaking myself in half for my boy. Silence settled around the room, warm instead of awkward. Mike stared at his plate, jaw tight. I had a daughter, he said finally. Emily, 6 years old. Blonde pigtails. Smile that could light up a helipad. His big hands flexed and unflexed. Leukemia got her. We fought it 18 months. Cancer still won. A few of the men shifted, but no one interrupted. Her mom blamed me, he continued. Said if I'd been a better provider, better insurance, better job, maybe we could have done more. After Emily died, she left too. Said she couldn't look at me without seeing what we lost. Kesha's eyes burned. Mike, I'm so sorry. Point is, he said, looking up at her. People think I ride, 'cause I'm running from responsibility. Truth is, I'm running from an empty house with a little girl's toys still in the corner. These men. He gestured around. Only family I got left. Something in his honesty cracked something in her. Jerome left 8 months ago, she heard herself say. Said he couldn't handle being a dad. Couldn't handle being broke. Said he had to find himself. She laughed once, humorless. He found himself with a waitress in Tennessee. Hasn't called once. Not $1 for Marcus. Never. Tommy asked gently. Never. It's like we never existed. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. People see me struggling and think I must have done something wrong. But sometimes life just breaks people. And the ones who love them, Mike said. For a moment, the weight of shared losses knit them together more tightly than any words could. But you opened the door anyway, Mike said softly. Even scared. Even with every reason not to. My mama always said if you turn away from someone who needs help, you're turning away from yourself, Kesha replied. Across the room, Marcus slept sprawled in Tommy's lap, tiny body completely relaxed. Watching her son sleep safely in the arms of a man she'd feared hours earlier brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "All of you. I haven't felt this safe in my own house ever." Mike nodded. "Feels mutual, Kesha. Feels mutual." Outside, the storm roared on. Inside, 25 bikers and one exhausted mother shared warmth, food, and something rarer: the feeling of being seen. By midnight, the house had settled into an odd but peaceful rhythm. Men lay shoulder to shoulder on the floor in their sleeping bags, boots lined neatly by the door. A low murmur of conversation drifted from the kitchen, where a few stragglers washed dishes and put food away. For the first time in months, Kesha's home felt full instead of hollow. Marcus had established Tommy as his new favorite human, dragging him from one toy to the next, babbling in his own private language. Tommy responded as if each half-word were a brilliant observation. "He's got good instincts about people," Mike observed lightly, watching Marcus attempt to braid Tommy's beard. "Kids always do." "He's been so lonely," Kesha admitted. "It's just been me and him for so long. I didn't realize how quiet it was until tonight." "We've all been a little lonely," Jake said from his spot near the window. "Feels real good to sit at a family table again." On the couch, Danny dozed under a blanket. Around midnight he started tossing, mumbling. Mike went to check on him and swore under his breath. "Guys, up," he barked. The room snapped awake. "He's burning up," Mike said. "Feels like a furnace." The men swarmed the couch, faces tight. "What do we do?" Pete asked. "We can't get him to a hospital in this." "Roads are still buried," Jake said. "I checked an hour ago. Nothing's moving." "In Afghanistan, when someone spiked like this, the medics," one of the younger men started, then faltered. "We don't have medics here." "We've got to cool him down," Mike said, but his voice betrayed that he didn't really know how. "We can't just watch this." Tough men who'd faced gunfire now stood helpless around a feverish comrade. "What if he gets worse?" Pete whispered. "What if we lose him?" "We're not losing anybody," Mike said. The conviction was there, even if the plan wasn't. From the kitchen doorway, Kesha stepped forward. "Mike," she said calmly, "I can help." 24 worried faces swung toward her. "You know what to do?" Mike asked quickly. "Some," she said. "My mother was a nurse. She taught me fevers, basic care. This isn't my first sick patient." "Please," Tommy said, voice cracking. "Tell us what to do. We'll do anything." "First," Kesha said, "we don't panic." She returned with a basin of cool water and several washcloths. Sitting on the edge of the couch, she laid a cloth across Danny's forehead and began wiping his face, neck, and arms with slow, steady strokes. "Danny? You hear me?" she asked softly. His eyelids fluttered. "Where am I?" "You're safe," she said in the same tone she used for Marcus. "You're in my house. Your brothers are here. You've got a fever, but I've got you." For hours she moved between kitchen and living room, brewing tea, swapping out cool cloths, coaxing sips of water between his cracked lips. The bikers watched, hushed. Some brought in fresh bowls of snow for her to melt. Others refilled the water basin, or took turns holding Danny's hand when he thrashed in delirium. "Mama," he mumbled once, reaching blindly. Without hesitation, Kesha took his hand. "I'm right here, baby," she soothed. "You're gonna be fine." From the doorway, Mike watched that simple scene. A broken soldier calling for his mother, and a tired stranger answering that call. Something raw flashed in his eyes. Around 3 a.m., the heat finally left Danny's skin. Kesha pressed the back of her hand to his forehead and smiled. "He's through it," she announced. "Fever broke. He should sleep now." The collective exhale shook the room. Pete wiped his eyes. Tommy squeezed Kesha's shoulder. "You saved his life," Mike said quietly. "We'd have sat here watching him burn up." Kesha shook her head. "You 25 saved mine. I haven't felt needed like this in a long time." By dawn, the wind had softened to a steady moan. The snow still lay deep, but the storm's fury had passed. In the kitchen, Kesha scrambled eggs over the gas flame and brewed coffee in a dented pot while the men checked weather reports on their phones. "We'll be rolling out soon," Mike said, leaning against the counter. "Roads should be passable in a few hours." A surprising pang went through her at the thought of the house emptying again. "I'll pack food," she said. "You'll need something for the road." "Kesha," Mike said, his tone shifting into something solemn. "What you did for us for Danny, we don't forget. We take care of our own. That includes you now." She looked up, meeting his gaze. "I didn't do anything anyone else wouldn't have done." He shook his head. "Most people wouldn't have cracked that door. Most people cross the street when they see us. You let 25 of us into your home in the middle of the night. You felt like family," she said simply. "You still do." When the time came, the goodbye hurt more than it should have for a group of people she'd known less than a day. Each man shook her hand or hugged her carefully. Each thanked her in his own halting way. Marcus clung to Tommy's jacket, crying when the older man tried to leave. "I'll see you again, little man," Tommy promised, his own voice unsteady. "You've got my word." Mike was last. He pressed a thick envelope into her palm. "It's not charity," he said firmly when she tried to refuse. "Payment for food, heat, lodging, and medical services. You're a healer, Kesha. Healers deserve to get paid." "I can't." "You can," he said. "And you will. We don't leave debts hanging." His expression gentled. "And that restaurant? Your mama's recipes? Don't give up. Good hearts and good food always find their way to each other." Kesha stood in the open doorway with Marcus on her hip, watching 25 motorcycles disappear into the gray morning. The envelope in her pocket felt heavy. So did the quiet. The house seemed unnaturally large after they left. She and Marcus ate breakfast alone in a kitchen that felt too big for two. But something had shifted inside her. The emptiness hurt, but it no longer felt permanent. "Friends come back?" Marcus asked, pointing toward the road. "I don't know, baby," she said softly. "But if they need us, I think they will." She finally opened the envelope. The sight stole her breath. More cash than she'd seen in years. Enough to pay rent, fix the heater, and buy proper kitchen equipment. On top lay a note in careful blocky handwriting. "For Mama Kesha, who showed us what family means. We won't forget." The brotherhood for the first time in years. Kesha went to bed believing tomorrow might actually be better than today. 3 days after the Hells Angels rode away, the house felt like a tomb again. The silence pressed at her ears. After 25 voices, shared meals, and easy laughter, the empty air seemed to ring. The $800 sat in neat stacks on the table. Her entire financial world transformed overnight. Enough to catch up the power, buy groceries, maybe pay for that long-needed heater repair. But all she could think was, what if this was it? A bright flash and then more darkness. She tried again with the restaurant. She bought fresh ingredients, made a new window sign. Fried chicken until the air was saturated with her mother's recipe. In 3 days, no one came. Hope didn't pay the electric. Nostalgia didn't buy diapers. On the 4th day, the food she'd prepared sat mostly untouched. Marcus had come down with a cold, his runny nose and fussiness stretching both her nerves and her budget. "Mama hungry," he whimpered now, pushing away the scrambled eggs she'd made him. Third meal he'd refused. She opened the fridge. Milk nearly gone. Groceries dwindling. The money Mike had left wouldn't stretch far if she used it for everything. Marcus' small body felt warmer than usual in her arms. Fever. She stared at the cash on the table and saw only a cruel choice. Medicine and food now, or rent and roof later. There was never really a choice. Not for her. She bundled Marcus in his warmest coat and walked into the biting afternoon cold. Mrs. Henderson's neat little house loomed closer with each step. Kesha's stomach knotted. Humiliation still burned from their last encounter. But she had no one else to ask. She knocked. On the third knock, the door flew open. Mrs. Henderson's face tightened the instant she saw them. "What do you want?" "I'm sorry to bother you," Kesha began, swallowing her pride. "My son's sick. I wondered if you might have some children's medicine I could borrow. Or a little milk. I'll pay you back as soon as I—" "Absolutely not." The words came out like a slap. "I told you before, I don't want anything to do with your kind of trouble." "Please," Kesha said, voice trembling. "He's just a baby. He's got a fever. I can't afford both his medicine and milk right now. If I could just—" "That is not my problem," Mrs. Henderson cut in. She started to close the door. Kesha's hand shot out instinctively. Please. I'll do anything. Get your hands off my door, Mrs. Henderson hissed. Get off my property or I call the police. Ma'am, he's burning up. I just need. I said get off my property. She shoved Kesha hard. Off balance from carrying Marcus, Kesha stumbled backward down the icy steps and hit the frozen sidewalk, pain exploding in her elbow. Marcus shrieked. Stay away from decent people. Mrs. Henderson shouted from the doorway. Take your bastard child and your welfare problems somewhere else. This is a respectable neighborhood. The door slammed. Kesha sat on the freezing concrete, arms tight around her screaming son, pain radiating up her arm, a deeper ache spreading through her chest. Mama hurt, Marcus sobbed, touching her face. I know, baby, she choked. Mama's hurt too. She forced herself upright. The walk home felt endless. Every step sent a jolt through her bruised elbow. The wind cut through her thin coat like knives. Honey, are you all right? She turned. An elderly black woman stood in the doorway of a small house Kesha had barely noticed before. Her silver hair was pulled into a neat bun. Worry lined her face. I saw what that woman did, the stranger said, stepping out despite the cold. That Henderson is mean clear through. Come on now. You and that baby get in here. You look like you need help. Kesha hesitated. After what had just happened, kindness felt almost dangerous. I don't want to be any trouble, she managed. Trouble? The woman let out a warm chuckle. Child, helping folks in need ain't trouble. It's our job. Name's Martha. Now get inside before that boy catches pneumonia. Martha's house was tiny, spotless, and smelled like yeast bread and something Kesha's heart recognized instantly: home. Sit right there, Martha ordered, pointing to a soft armchair near the fireplace. Let me see this little angel. She examined Marcus with practiced care, checked his temperature, peered down his throat, listened to his chest with an old stethoscope she pulled from a drawer. He's got a little cold, she pronounced. Nothing that won't clear with rest and proper care. I've got children's medicine in the bathroom and fresh milk in the fridge. Kesha watched, stunned, as Martha moved with brisk efficiency. Pouring medicine, warming milk with honey, wrapping up slices of still warm bread. Why are you helping us? Kesha asked quietly when Martha pressed a spoon of medicine into Marcus' mouth. Martha's hand drifted to a silver necklace at her throat, its surface etched with intricate designs. Because I know what it is to be alone with a sick child and no help in sight, she said. And because my mama always said, kindness comes back to you when you need it most. She handed Kesha a small envelope along with a grocery bag full of basics. This'll help with your bills, Martha said when Kesha tried to refuse. Don't fuss. I've got more than I need and no kids to spend it on. Marcus was already perking up from the medicine, fascinated by a little music box Martha had given him. His smile, thin but real, nearly broke Kesha. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. You don't owe me thanks, Martha said gently. Just take care of that boy. And remember there's still good people left. More good than bad, even if it don't always look that way. Kesha walked home carrying her son and Martha's gifts, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. She didn't know that 3 days later, Maple Street would shake under the thunder of 1,500 motorcycles. Or that Martha's kindness and her own would turn out to be halves of the same miracle. Sometimes the universe's timing is so precise it feels like more than coincidence. Sometimes the smallest kindness starts a chain reaction no one could have predicted. 3 days after Martha saved them, life had shifted. Marcus was himself again. Fever gone, appetite back with a vengeance. He toddled around the house, chattering and playing with the little toys Martha had sent home with him. The envelope from Martha had held $200 and a note in steady, looping handwriting. For a mother who reminds me of myself at your age. Keep your head up, honey. Better days are coming. Martha. Kesha used it to buy food and pay the most urgent bills. It wasn't enough to fix everything. But it bought time. She was stirring a pot of soup for lunch when she felt it. A faint vibration under her feet, like distant thunder. Mama, what that? Marcus asked, pausing in his play. The floorboards trembled harder. Dishes in the cabinet rattled. She wiped her hands on a towel and went to the front window, heart climbing into her throat. At first, the street looked empty. But the sound kept swelling. a deep layered rumble that wrapped around the house and refused to fade. Then she saw them. Far down Maple Street they appeared. A line of motorcycles so long it blurred into the horizon. Chrome and steel glinted through the winter sunlight, engines roaring in unison as they rolled steadily toward her house. "Oh my God," she whispered. The lead bikes reached her yard and began to fan out with practiced precision, parking along both curbs. Behind them came more. And more. By the time the last bike pulled in, the quiet residential street had become a staging ground for the largest motorcycle rally Kesha had ever seen or imagined. All told, 1,500 Harley-Davidsons, engines roaring so loud the air itself seemed to shake. Marcus climbed onto a chair to look out. "Big bikes, Mama," he crowed. "So many big bikes." Neighbors' front doors flew open. People stepped out in coats and slippers, mouths dropping open. Phones appeared in shaky hands. Mrs. Henderson stood on her perfect lawn, face bleached with shock and fear. At the front of the formation, Kesha recognized them. Mike, Tommy, Jake, Pete. The 25 men who had eaten at her table and slept on her floor. But now they were flanked by hundreds more riders, men and women alike, all wearing the same patches. The same quiet, serious look. Mike swung off his bike and started toward her house. Behind him, the 1,500 engines cut off in flawless unison. The sudden silence was deafening. "Kesha," Mike called. "We need to talk." She stepped onto the porch, Marcus propped on her hip, the eyes of an entire street, and 1,500 bikers on her. Mike, what is this?" she managed. "Why are you all here?" He stopped at the bottom of her steps, gaze steady. "We told you we don't forget," he said. "And we don't leave debts unpaid." A ripple of whispers moved through the neighbors. Mrs. Henderson edged closer, curiosity wrestling with fear. "I don't understand," Kesha said. But part of her already suspected this was bigger than anything she could imagine. Tommy walked up beside Mike, carrying a large manila envelope. "Kesha," he said, "that night you saved our lives. You fed us. You patched me up. You treated us like family when the world treats us like criminals." Jake stepped forward. "We've been busy the past 3 days. Making calls. Calling in favors. Reaching out to every chapter from here to California." Mike gestured at the sea of bikes. "These are our brothers and sisters. Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. When they heard what you did, about who you are, they wanted to show up." A tall woman with graying hair and kind eyes stepped forward from the front row. "I'm Sarah, from the Chicago chapter," she said. "We heard about the woman who opened her door to 25 strangers in a blizzard. The mother who saved a young man's life with nothing but love and know-how. Stories like that travel fast in our world." Another writer from Cleveland added, "Real courage? Real kindness? People talk." Mike pulled a thick envelope from his jacket and held it out. "This is from all of us," he said. "Every chapter chipped in. It's enough to clear your debts, fix this house, and get your restaurant up on its feet for real." Kesha stared. "I can't," she said. "This is too much. I just did what anyone would." "No," Tommy interrupted gently. "You did what almost nobody does. That's why we're here." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance as news vans made their way toward Maple Street. Reporters and camera crews weren't far behind. "And that's not all," Mike said. "We brought contractors, electricians, plumbers, people who ride with us. This house is getting fixed today. Properly. Top to bottom." Sarah lifted her clipboard. "We've got a marketing plan," she added. "Social media, word of mouth, local press. By the time we're done, everybody in Detroit will know Mama Kesha's kitchen." Tears blurred Kesha's vision. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do all this for me?" Mike's expression softened, the tough leader giving way to the grieving father underneath. "Because you showed us what family looks like," he said. "You reminded us kindness still exists. And sometimes, when somebody saves your life, you get a chance to help save theirs right back." The neighbors edged closer, filming, staring. On her lawn, Mrs. Henderson looked like someone had yanked the ground out from under her. "Big bikes," Marcus said again, squirming to get down. "Can I?" Tommy asked, nodding at the boy. Kesha handed Marcus over. He instantly pointed at the bikes, chattering excitedly. So many big bikes, he shouted. That's right, Tommy said, grinning. And every one of them is here. 'Cause your mama is the bravest, kindest woman we know. On some silent cue, the bikers began to move. Not to leave but toward the house. They didn't start engines. They picked up tools. Hammers. Drills. Ladders. Paint cans. Boxes of tile. New appliances. Lumber. We're gonna get to work, Mike announced. And we're not leaving until Mama Kesha's kitchen is ready to serve the best soul food in Detroit. Maple Street was about to become something no one who lived there would ever forget. Within an hour, the block looked like a festival crossed with a construction site. Work crews formed with military efficiency. One group attacked the exterior siding, roof, windows. Another tackled plumbing, wiring, insulation. A third focused on the kitchen, unloading commercial-grade stoves, ovens, refrigerators, and sinks from trailers. The neighbors, at first frozen on their porches, gradually drifted closer, drawn by curiosity and the sheer spectacle of 1,500 Hells Angels renovating a falling-down house. Kids pressed against fences, eyes wide at rows of parked motorcycles. Local news vans set up tripods as reporters hurriedly practiced intros. Mrs. Henderson stood rigid at the edge of her manicured lawn, her face cycling through disbelief, fear, and something else, the dawning realization that she had been very, very wrong. "I can't believe this," whispered Mrs. Johnson from 2 houses down. "All this for her? Did you hear what she did?" muttered old Mr. Davis, usually silent, beside her. "Took in those bikers in the storm. Fed him. Saved that young one when he got sick. Kesha did that." "I didn't think she was." Mrs. Johnson stopped herself, hearing what she'd almost said. In the middle of the chaos, Martha arrived, walking slowly up the sidewalk, eyes wide. She'd followed the noise from her little house and now took in the sight. Leather-clad bikers hauling lumber with the same focus they once gave to missions overseas. Kesha stood near the porch, still overwhelmed, watching her home turn into something else entirely. Marcus rode on Tommy's shoulders, squealing every time Tommy pointed out a new tool or bike. "This is incredible," Sarah said, joining Kesha with her clipboard. "We've got the kitchen layout finalized, dining room expansion mapped, labor scheduled. We'll be done by tomorrow night." "Tomorrow?" Kesha shook her head. "You can't rebuild a house in a day." "Honey," Sarah laughed, "you've never seen 1,500 bikers on a mission. We built a whole playground for a kids' hospital in 6 hours once." Danny emerged from the house looking much stronger, a toolbox in one hand, paint flecks on his shirt. "The kitchen's gonna be insane," he said, grinning. "Industrial stove, prep space, new freezer. You'll be able to serve 50 people, no sweat." "I still can't believe you're doing this," Kesha said, voice thick. "After I put you through so much that night." Danny frowned. "Put us through? You kept me alive. If you hadn't known how to handle that fever." His fingers drifted to the necklace at his throat. It was silver, old, almost exactly like Martha's. "That's a beautiful piece," Kesha said. Danny glanced down, his expression going soft. "It was my mother's," he said. "Last thing I had of her. There was a fire in our building when I was 7. We got separated in the chaos. Foster family let me keep this. Never saw her again." From somewhere behind them, a sharp intake of breath cut through the air. "Danny!" The voice shook, thin with age, thick with emotion. Everything stilled. They turned. Martha stood frozen a few yards away, staring at Danny like she was seeing a ghost. "Danny," she repeated, voice trembling. "Is that you?" He blinked, confused. "Ma'am, I don't." "You were 7, she said, taking an unsteady step forward. "Riverside Apartments. There was a fire. You've got a birthmark, little crescent moon shape, behind your left ear." Automatically, Danny's hand flew to the spot. His face went white. "How do you know that?" he asked, voice barely there. "Because I'm your mother," Martha sobbed. "I've been looking for you for 30 years. The clamor of tools and chatter faded like someone turned down the volume on the world. Danny stared, mouth open, eyes wide. Martha's gaze locked on the necklace. "I gave you that for your 7th birthday," she whispered. "My grandmother's. There's an inscription on the back. Love never dies." With shaking hands, Danny flipped the pendant over. There it was. "Mama." The word escaped him on a broken breath. "Oh, my baby," Martha cried, closing the distance and pulling him into her arms. "My beautiful boy." They clung to each other, both of them shaking. Around them an entire crowd, bikers, neighbors, reporters, went silent. Mike stepped, his eyes damp. "Martha, you're Danny's mom?" he asked. "I am," she said fiercely, not letting go. "And you all are the family that watched over him when I couldn't." "We're his brothers," Tommy said simply. "Guess that makes you ours too." The emotion rolled outward like a shockwave. Men wiped their faces unashamed. Neighbors hugged strangers. Even the news crews lowered their cameras for a moment just to watch. "I don't understand," Mrs. Henderson said weakly, pushing through the crowd. "What are the odds of all this? How is this even possible?" Kesha looked at the woman who'd shoved her onto the ice days earlier. Strangely, anger didn't rise. Pity did. "Sometimes kindness finds its way back home," Kesha said quietly. "Sometimes when you help somebody, you're helping yourself and don't know it yet." Martha looked up, eyes finding Kesha across the crowd. "You," she said slowly, realization dawning. "You're the woman who saved my boy from that fever. You're why he was here to find me. And you're the woman who gave my son medicine and food when we had nowhere to go," Kesha answered. "Looks like we've been looking after each other's babies without even knowing." The crowd erupted in cheers. Engines revved in celebration. It felt like the whole street exhaled. In a handful of days, a blizzard, a brave choice, and a biker brotherhood had reunited a mother and son separated by 3 decades. Mrs. Henderson stood on the edge, watching joy erupt around her. For the first time in a long time, she looked small, maybe even lost. The energy from Danny and Martha's reunion supercharged the work. Neighbors who'd just been watching now grabbed tools and joined in. Bikers coached them through swinging hammers, pulling nails, painting walls. The line between us and them blurred hour by hour. By sunset, the transformation of Kesha's house was staggering. The cramped front room had become a proper dining area, bright and welcoming. Fresh paint dried on clean walls. New flooring gleamed where stained carpet used to be. In the back, her kitchen looked like something out of a TV show. Professional stoves. Stainless steel prep tables. A walk-in cooler. New sinks. Real ventilation. Above the front door, a freshly painted sign read, "Mama Kesha's kitchen where love is the secret ingredient." "I can't believe this is my house," Kesha whispered, standing in the center of her new kitchen. "Believe it," Sarah said, wiping paint from her hands. "And believe this. Your story's already blowing up online. We set up your socials. You're officially viral. People are planning road trips just to come eat here." Martha and Danny walked over, still magnetized to each other. "Honey," Martha said, taking Kesha's hands, "I need you to understand something. When I helped you the other day, I thought I was just doing what any decent person should do. I didn't know I was helping the woman who saved my son. And I didn't know the woman who rescued me and Marcus was his mama," Kesha replied. "Feels like the universe hit us over the head with the same lesson." "It was telling us we're family," Martha said firmly. "All of us. You, me, Marcus, my stubborn boy here, and every one of these angels on 2 wheels." Mike joined them, leather jacket dusty with sawdust, face shining with that glow of a job well done. "Kesha, one last piece of business," he said, pulling out another envelope. Inside was a stack of legal papers. "This is the deed to your house," he said. "Paid in full. No more rent. No more landlord. This place belongs to you and Marcus. Period." Her fingers shook as she flipped through the documents. "Mike, this is too much. I can't accept." "You can," he said kindly. "And you will. A restaurant needs roots. You can't build anything if somebody can kick you out." Danny slung an arm around Martha. "Besides," he said, smiling, "we're gonna be regulars. Mama's already volunteered to help with some old family recipes. And I've got 30 years of mothering to catch up on," Martha added. "Seems to me this is the perfect place to do it." News cameras captured every second. The story of the single mom who sheltered 25 Hell's Angels in a storm and helped reunite a lost child with his mother was already spreading far beyond Detroit. As dusk fell, neighbors gathered, drawn together by the smell of food and the pull of something new and fragile forming between them. Mrs. Johnson came across the street first, holding a covered dish. I, brought cornbread, she said shyly. Thought maybe we could all eat together. Christening the place, you know. That sounds perfect, Kesha said, meaning it. Mr. and Mrs. Davis shuffled over next. We owe you an apology, Mrs. Davis said quietly. We've lived next to you 2 years and never tried to know you. That was wrong. We've all messed up, Kesha said gently. What matters is what we do next. Even the younger families drifted over, kids tugging their sleeves, begging to look at the bikes. The Hells Angels answered questions about horsepower and chrome like proud uncles. Then, to everyone's surprise, Mrs. Henderson stepped off her porch. She crossed the street slowly, shoulders drawn tight, stopping in front of Kesha. I owe you an apology, she said, voice barely audible. A big one. What I did the other day, how I talked to you and your boy. There's no excuse. The crowd went quiet. I was wrong about you, she continued, voice thickening. Wrong about a lot of things. Watching all this today. Seeing what kind of person you are. I'm ashamed of myself. Kesha studied the woman who had pushed her to the concrete and called her baby names. The anger she'd expected didn't come. Something softer did. Maybe because Kesha knew what it was to be twisted by fear. We all have bad days, Mrs. Henderson, she said softly. What matters is what we do from here. I'd like to be a better neighbor, Mrs. Henderson said. If you'll let me. Everyone's welcome at Mama Kesha's kitchen, Kesha said, giving her a real smile. Everyone. As the sky darkened, grills appeared. Bikers and neighbors stood shoulder to shoulder flipping burgers, sharing side dishes, trading stories. Children ran between picnic tables and motorcycles. Big, tattooed men carefully handed out helmets, lifting kids onto bikes for photos that would live framed on family walls for years. Marcus, appointed unofficial mascot, darted from person to person like he'd never known a stranger. Tommy had made him a tiny leather vest that read Little Angel on the back. Look, Mama, Marcus shouted, racing over. I a big boy now. You sure are, she laughed, scooping him up. Biggest, bravest boy I know. Martha moved through the crowd, making sure plates were full, strangers were introduced, and no one sat alone. Community organizing seemed to come as naturally to her as breathing. This, she said to Kesha, gesturing to neighbors and bikers laughing together, is what a neighborhood is supposed to feel like. Later, as the work wrapped up and the party slowed, Mike handed Kesha a small leather notebook. Contact info for every chapter that helped, he said. If you ever need anything, breakdown, trouble, whatever, you call. You're family now. That doesn't expire. I don't know how to thank you, she said. Any of you. This is more than I've ever dreamed of. Don't thank us, he replied. Just keep being the woman who opened that door. Keep feeding people. Keep showing them what kindness looks like. One by one, the bikers mounted up, engines flaring to life in waves. Hugs and handshakes went on and on. Numbers and emails were exchanged. Promises to visit were made and meant. This ain't goodbye, Tommy told Marcus, lifting him for a last bear hug. Uncle Tommy's coming back all the time. And when you're big enough, maybe I'll teach you to ride. Really? Marcus' eyes went saucer-wide. Really? But first you gotta help Mama make this the best restaurant in Detroit. I will. I promise. The 1,500 motorcycles rolled out in squads, their thunder receding into the night like distant surf. When the last headlight disappeared, the street settled into a gentler hum. Neighbors cleaning up together, kids laughing, dishes clinking. Kesha stood in the doorway of her transformed home with Marcus on her hip, Martha and Danny at her side, and a street full of faces that no longer felt like strangers. The crushing loneliness that had haunted her felt like someone else's story. Mama! Marcus murmured sleepily. We happy now? Kesha looked at the new sign over her door, the shining kitchen behind her, the neighbors talking like old friends, the family she'd found in the unlikeliest people. Yes, baby, she whispered, eyes stinging with grateful tears. We're happy now. Tomorrow would be the grand opening of Mama Kesha's kitchen, and the start of a new story not just for her and Marcus, but for an entire community that had finally remembered how to be one. 6 months later, Maple Street barely resembled the place Kesha had once described as a prison. Kids rode bikes up and down the block, cutting across lawns without a second thought. Neighbors organized potlucks and movie nights. Fences that had once felt like walls now served mainly as places to lean while chatting. At the center of it all stood a small soul food restaurant with a big story. Mama Kesha's kitchen wasn't just successful. It was a landmark. The walls inside were lined with framed photos from the day 1,500 Hells Angels had turned a broken house into a dream, aerial shots of endless motorcycles, candid moments of bikers and neighbors working side by side, a front and center picture of Martha and Danny's tearful embrace. Food critics raved. Local papers called Kesha's fried chicken soul on a plate, and a masterclass in family tradition. A major food network had already filmed a segment not only about the food, but about the miracle that built the place. Orders poured in from people who'd watched the story online and wanted to taste the recipe that had started it all. But the markers that meant most to Kesha were smaller. It was mornings like this one at 5 a.m., when she stood in her gleaming kitchen prepping for the day and realized she hadn't felt truly alone in months. "Morning, Mama Kesha," Danny called, coming in the back door with a box of produce. At 26, he'd become her right hand. Assistant manager, problem solver, sometime bouncer, and full-time big brother to Marcus. "Morning, honey," she said as he kissed her cheek. "Your mama's already out front, wrangling those biscuit recipes." In the dining room, Martha bustled between tables, testing another variation of her grandmother's biscuits. At 73, she'd found new purpose helping at the restaurant and organizing community events that now used Mama Kesha's kitchen as home base. "Those smell deadly," Kesha said, biting into a warm biscuit. "Good," Martha replied. "We're gonna need 'em." Mrs. Henderson called, reserved a table for 12. "She's bringing her church group for lunch." Mrs. Henderson's transformation had been one of the most surprising to watch. The woman who'd once pushed Kesha onto the ice had become one of her most vocal supporters, personally sending a steady stream of customers through the door. "She's trying to set things right," Martha had observed early on. "Some folks take longer to find their way to kindness. Once they do, they hold on tight." By noon, every table was full. Hells Angels in their cuts chatted easily with suburban families. Retired church ladies sampled collard greens next to young professionals digging into chicken and waffles on their lunch break. Children from all over the neighborhood treated the place like a second living room. Marcus, now a solid 2.5, darted between tables like a tiny maitre d', armed with a step stool so he could help at the register. "Uncle Mike," he squealed as the familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Mike had kept his promise. He visited at least twice a month, always with a rotating crew of brothers and sisters who wanted to see the place that had changed so much for so many. "There's my little man," Mike said, scooping him up. "You been helping in the kitchen?" "I can crack eggs now," Marcus announced proudly. "Mama says I a natural chef." "Just like your mama," Mike said, glancing at Kesha with a smile that had become as comfortable as an old jacket. The day rolled with its usual rhythm. Lunch rush, lull, early dinner crowd. In the afternoon, a bus pulled up out front and 40 elementary school kids poured out, part of a monthly field trip Kesha had insisted on. Every month, one class from a struggling Detroit school ate free at Mama Kesha's kitchen. The food was the hook. The story was the lesson. "Miss Kesha," a 7-year-old girl named Aisha called, bouncing on her toes. A regular on these visits, she adored the fried chicken almost as much as the storytelling. "Tell us about the snow night again." Kesha wiped her hands and came out into the dining room. "You all want to hear it?" she asked. A sea of hands shot up. So she told it. The blizzard, the 25 Hells Angels at her door, the fear, the choice. Danny's fever. The envelope. Martha. The 1,500 bikes. The house rebuilt. The family found. She always ended the same way. "The most important part," she said, looking at their rapt faces, "is that kindness is like a seed. You plant it when you help somebody, and it grows into things you can't even imagine." Those bikers planted seeds everywhere they went. And look what grew from just one night. As evening settled and the last customers drifted out, Kesha found her usual spot at the kitchen window, looking down Maple Street. The house that once felt like the loneliest on the block now glowed at the heart of a real community. Children chased each other between yards. Adults chatted on porches. Neighbors looked out for each other in a way that still made her chest ache with gratitude. Martha joined her, following her gaze. You know what I think about? Martha said quietly. All the folks out there right now feeling like you did back then, alone, scared. Like Danny felt. Like Mrs. Henderson did under all that anger. What about them? Kesha asked. I think how close they might be to a different life, Martha said. One act of kindness away. One person willing to open a door. One moment of choosing love over fear. Danny came up behind them, dish towels slung over his shoulder. And it doesn't have to be huge, he added. Could be a hot meal. Could be a ride. Could be medicine for somebody's sick kid. Or just treating them like they matter. Kesha thought of the ripples from that one snowbound night. The bikers who'd deepened their commitment to charity. The neighbors who'd finally seen past their own prejudices. The children who now came here to learn that differences didn't have to divide. Sometimes I think this is what my mama meant, she said slowly. When she said helping others was really helping yourself. I thought I was giving those men shelter for a night. She looked around at the busy, cozy restaurant, the photos on the walls, Martha and Danny beside her. Turns out, they were sheltering me from a lifetime of being alone. Mike, lingering by the front, heard her and walked over. Your mama was right, he said. But she missed something. What's that? Kesha asked. You didn't just help yourself, he said. You helped us remember who we wanted to be. Every one of us who walked through your door that night. Every neighbor who learned to see people instead of stereotypes. Every kid who hears your story and decides to be brave instead of scared. Night fell. The restaurant quieted. Kesha made one last pass through the dining room, straightening chairs more out of habit than need. Really, she was just soaking it in. The reflections in the windows, the warmth radiating from the kitchen, the sense of peace in the air. Marcus had fallen asleep in a booth, face sticky from dessert. Danny lifted him carefully, murmuring, "Sweet dreams, little angel," as he carried him upstairs. Before following, Kesha stepped onto the front porch. The street glowed with soft, ordinary light. Families moved around inside their homes. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the low rumble of a motorcycle. Then another. Echoes of the brotherhood that had become woven into her life. She thought of Jerome, wherever he was, and wondered if he'd ever seen a news segment, a shared video, a photo tagged from Mama Kesha's kitchen. She hoped he had. Not to spite him, but to show what could happen when you stayed and fought for your family instead of running. Thank you, she whispered into the cool air. To her mother, to Martha, to Mike and his riders, to the strange grace that had steered 25 motorcycles to her door in the worst storm of her life. Somewhere out there, an engine revved, then faded, like a promise kept. She went back inside, locked up, and climbed the stairs to the home above the restaurant. A home filled with love, laughter, and the certainty that tomorrow would bring more chances to feed people, to listen, to show them a different way of being neighbors. In the end, that was the real legacy of Mama Kesha's kitchen. Not just the food or the viral fame or the miraculous reunion it had made possible, but the quiet reminder it offered every person who walked through the door. That the smallest acts of compassion can ripple outward until they change everything. That a story that starts with one woman alone in a storm can become proof that we are all more connected than we realize. That kindness is always the right risk. And that when you open your heart to strangers, you often discover they were never strangers at all. They were family you just hadn't met yet. If this story moved you, help us spread more like it. Hit like, click subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so each day can start with a reminder of what empathy and courage can do.